Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Namaste, everyone. And tonight we're going to begin the second chapter of the Satya Narayana Vrat Katha. This is the story of the vow to speak and act in truth. And let's read about some of the people who celebrated this worship and how it affected their lives. Ambu Swaha, Ambuva Swaha, Om Swaha Swaha, Amburbuva Swaha Swaha, Atadviti Odhyaya Sutuvacha Swaha, Atanyat Prasam Prabhachyami, Kritangina Paradvitam, Kasit Kashi Pure Ramye, Asid Vipro Hitanardat Swaha, Sutrivyam Yakulo Bhutva, Nitam Prabhama Bhutale, Dukitam Brahmatam Kristva, Bhagavan Brahmana Prikasva, Vrita Brahmana Rupastam, Prapachad Vijmadarat, Kimarta Brahma Se Vipra, Magid Yityan Sudukita Sva, Tatsarvam Srotamichami, Kapyatam Vichasatama Brahmanuvacha Sva, Brahmanosti Taridoham, Pikshartam Vai Prabhamayamekin Sva, Upayan Yadi Janasi, Kripaya Kataka Prabhu, Rida Brahmanuvacha Sva, Satya Narayana Vishnur, Panchivdarta Palapadat Sva, Tasya Twang Pujanam Vipra, Kurishwa Pratmutabam, Yakritva Sarvadukebyo, Mukto Bhavati Manapasva, Vidanam Javratasyapi, Vipraya Bhashakyatnataha, Satya Narayana Vritas, Tatri Pantaryatagita Swaha, Tadratam Sangsari Shami, Taduktam Brahmane Nave, Iti Sanchinta Viprosa, Ratro Nitram Nalabdaban Swaha, Tata Prataha Samudaya, Satya Narayana Pratam, Krishya Giti Sankopya, Pakshartamam Gadmaditi Jasva, Tasmine Badine Vipra, Pachuram Ravyamatavam, Taneva Simbandami Sardam, Sadyasya Pratmacharatsva, Sarva Dukovanyamuktaha, Sarva Samphat Samanvita, Babu Vasavija Sreshto, Pratasyasya Prabhaspata Tadha Pravriti Kalecha, Masi Masi Vratam Pratam, Evam Narayana Syedam, Pratam Pritva Vijotamaha Swaha, Sarva Papa Vinyubhukto, Dulabham Mokshamadabhat, Bratamasya Yada Vipra, Prithivyan Sankarishati Sva, Tadanekam Sarvadukam Cha, Manushtyasya Vinasyate, Evam Narayane Nokta, Naradaya Matatane Sva, Mayata Katitam Vipraha, Kimayat Katakamicha, Rishaya Ucha Sva, Tasma Viprachatam Evitkena, Prithivyan Charitamune Sva, Tatsarvam Shrotvitamaham, Sadasmakam Prajayate Sudracha Sva, Svinutam Bunakasare, Pratangina Kritam Lui, Ekadad Vijavara, Yata Bhavi Vistare Sva, Bhagavi Svachani Sardam, Pratam Katu Subhujata, ekam mitnantare kaschet kashtakrita samagata sva Behi kashtacha samstapya vipashya grihamaya Krishnaya piridatmanacha Dristabhipramkrita pratam sva Pranipatya vijambraha Kimidam kriyate tvaya Videkim palabdoti Visradadane prabho sva Viprutvacha sva Satya Narayana Shedam Pradam Sarepsitapadam Tasya Pramasadamai Pasadabam Danadyadam Yadikam Rakatsva Tasmadita Gratam Radyatva Kashtakrita Viharshita Papo Jadam Prasadam Cha Bhuktva Sanagaram Yosva Satya Narayanam Devam Manasa Chinta Yanditi Kashtangri Vikrayato Grame Prapchate Chadyam Chaddanam Sva Taneva Satadevasya Krishye Vratvutamam Iti Sanchintya Manasa Kashtamrita Dumastake Sva Chikamandagare Ramye Dhaninam Yatra Sanstiti Tadine Kashtamulyam Cha Digunam Prapya Banaso Sva Tata Prasana Kridaya Sapatwan Kadali Palam Shakaran Krita Dubde Cha Godamasya Chaturnikam Sva Kritwe Katra Sapalam Cha Kritwa Svagrihan Yagam Tato Bandhu Samahuya Chakara Vidina Vratam Sva Tabratasya Prabhavena Dhanaputra Vito Babad Ialoke Sukam Bhutva Tante Sata Puranga Sva Iti Sri Skanda Purane Reva Kande Sri Satya Narayana Vrat Katha Gandhviti Yodhyaya Sva Sri Satya Narayana Bhagavan Ki Jai. In chapter 2, Suta told the assembly of sadhus that he would narrate the story of an old Brahmin who lived in the city of Kashi, which is now called Benares, or Varanasi, whose life was changed as a consequence of performing the Satya Narayana Puja. That Brahmin was so poor that he spent his entire life begging alms throughout the city, and he never had time for his worship. One day, the Lord came to him in the form of an old Brahmin priest and asked him the cause of his plight. Now, I want you to remember that the word they're using for old Brahmin priest is a Dvija. An old Dvija. And a Dvija means someone who has been born ja twice. Dvija, two births. And we all take birth from the womb of mother. And then we take birth from the womb of wisdom when we become initiated with the Gayatri Mantra. And remember, the Gayatri Mantra is the Mool Mantra of the Sanatana Dharma. It's the mantra that says, hey, there is no circumstance in my life or in the lives of any of us in which greater wisdom would not be welcome. And the very prayer for greater wisdom and clarity and understanding in every circumstance is a rebirth. It's a second birth. So this old Brahmin priest the Lord took the form of a Dvija. And God speaks through the mouths of those who love wisdom. Because the voice of wisdom, remember in the book of Proverbs in chapter 8, does not wisdom speak? She calls from the gates. She is the voice of God, and she's calling unto you, O citizens of peace. She's calling unto you. And here God is coming in the form of a Brahmin priest. and says, "What's wrong with you?" And finding a sympathetic ear, the Brahmin proceeded to narrate his life story. That old Brahmin proceeded to narrate his story, whereupon he requested from the priest some knowledge of a way to end his miserable condition. "Hey, do you know any way I can get out of this plight? Here I am, I'm a day late and $1 short, all the time, consistently. I don't even have time to worship. I'm so burdened by debt and by poverty. Poverty has become such a burden to me that I can't even think about God. I'm always thinking about mine because I don't have enough of it." And the priest, God, in the form of that priest, he suggested that he worship the Supreme Lord, the consciousness of eternal truth, with one pointed devotion caveat. One pointed devotion. It's not enough to throw flowers at the foot of a statue. You have to really love God and really worship God. The statue is the symbol. Just like 0 is a symbol. 0 doesn't mean anything. It means the absence of everything. But it's a symbol we've all agreed upon, that every time we see the 0, we mean you can't count it. And then, in the same way, the murti, or the deity, or the form of God is a symbol for the presence of everything, just as 0 is the symbol for the absence of everything. So worship that consciousness of eternal truth with one pointed devotion, and that the Lord Satyanarayan, being pleased, would put an end to his difficulties. As soon as you make a sankalpa, or a firm determination to perform such a puja, and to always speak and act in truth, the Lord himself will provide all that is needed. All we need is the pure intention. So it's not about getting things from the bazaar and putting them, lining them up, and getting all the flowers and getting all the fruits and getting everything in its proper location. That is not the puja. The puja is the intention to love God and to worship God and to make this as a way of life. That's our sankalpa. And as soon as we make the sankalpa, as soon as we define that determination to perform this kind of puja, to live this kind of life, to always speak and act in truth, the Lord himself will provide all that is needed. Taking the instructions of the method of performance, the old Brahmin was extremely happy, and he could hardly sleep because of his excitement. I'm going to worship God tomorrow. This is fun. This is good stuff. He got really excited. I remember we stayed at Devi's house one night in Guwahati, and Ma said to Devi, please make Mangal Arati at 4 o'clock in the morning. So then Devi got up about 11:45, and she looked at the clock. No. Mom said I got to do it at 4 o'clock. So she went back and laid down. And then she got up at 1 o'clock. And then she got up at 1:30, and she got up at 2 o'clock, and she got up every half hour and looked at the clock again, and finally it was time to make the arati, and she was exhausted. But she did it. So he could hardly sleep because of his excitement. The next day, when he went out as usual to beg, much to his surprise, he received so much food and other articles that he was able to perform the puja with ease. He invited many people and performed the puja with such humility and devotion that the Lord was pleased with him. By the Lord's grace, he became wealthy both spiritually and materially. And performing the puja every month, he inspired many people to serve God and to live in peace. Ultimately, he attained liberation. Because that became his life. Telling the truth was his sadhana. Acting in accordance was his discipline. And then that became a way of life for him, and everybody saw the example of his life. He came and they wanted to be closer to him because he was in love with God. And he had the magic. The magic of love. Everybody knows when you've got the magic. And you can tell who's got the magic because they're not speaking just from the book. They're speaking from their heart. And you know when you're getting a lecture from the head or you're getting the magic from the heart. You know when you're touched by that magic. That makes all the difference in the world. That's called credibility. It comes from experience, not just from memorizing passages from a book. So this became an inspiration to others, and he became spiritually wealthy. What does it mean to have metaphysical wealth? That metaphysical wealth, that wealth that is beyond the physical. It's intuitive. He's got the wealth of peace, and he's got the bhav. He lives in the bhava zone. Wherever she goes, there is everybody wants to be. Because they know that's in the bhava zone. And they want to be next to the bhav because it's real. And you can tell when it's real and when it's put up. Yeah, everybody knows the difference. We all are blessed with such discrimination. We can tell who is acting and who is living. So he inspired many people to serve God and to live in peace, and ultimately he attained liberation. Whoever, and this is a promise of the scripture, the Skanda Purana, whoever will observe this puja just as God explained it to Narad, just as Suta explained it to Shonak and all the other rishis, just as Swamiji is explaining it to you right now, will be relieved from all pain and will attain peace and prosperity. Sri Satyanarayana Bhagavan Ki Jai! At the request of the rishis, Suta narrated another story of a man who observed this vow of worship. Once there was a woodcutter who made his living selling wood for fuel. One day, as he was out selling his wood, he passed by the home of that Brahmin, from which he heard the chanting of mantras from the pujas and the singing of songs. Pretty cool. You remember the woodcutter who went to he met the sannyasi, said, "Go forward." And the woodcutter went forward, and he found, instead of just regular wood, he found sandalwood. And he became very wealthy. And he said, then one day he remembered the sadhu's words, and he said, "Go forward." He didn't say stop at the sandalwood. He went a little farther into the forest. He found a silver mine. And he became really wealthy. And then while one day he said, "Well, that sadhu didn't tell me to stop. He told me to go forward." And here he went past the silver mine and he found a gold mine. And he went even farther and he found a mine full of diamonds and gems and jewels. Well, putting aside his bundle of firewood, that woodcutter entered into the home and he joined in the devotional worship of the Lord. That's like finding the gold mine. Or the gems and the jewels, the jewels of worship, the gems of devotion. After the worship was complete, the woodcutter took instructions on the method and meaning of worship. He decided that if God would give him the means, he would certainly like to perform this worship. But you see, God, I'm just a woodcutter. And how am I going to make some pandabaksha? How am I going to make this porridge for anybody who comes on the woodcutter's wages? So I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. If you provide the materials, what I need, I'm going to do the worship. Calling out to God, asking for the means to perform his worship, the woodcutter lifted up his bundle and went into the bazaar. Immediately, wealthy people came to him in need of wood and purchased his entire supply. Thereupon, he took the money and bought the necessary materials for worship and returned to his home. With great devotion, he observed the vow of worship in every meticulous detail. Singing the glories of this narration, he made a vow to serve the Lord by speaking and acting in truth. And the Lord was pleased with his devotion, and in the course of times he had noble sons, became a man of wealth, and ultimately attained to true knowledge. Here ends the second chapter. Sri Satyanarayana Bhagavan Ki Jai! Let's pause for a few moments and see if there are any questions that we should discuss. Yes, please.
Swamiji, in the story, the woodcutter and the brahmin, they prayed and did worship for a specific motive, to get relief from their difficulties. And some pray for themselves, others pray for others, and there is also this, the saints speak of motiveless prayer. Is this last one the highest ideal for us, Swamiji?
Absolutely. Without any other motivation than just praying just to be, because it's the nicest way to spend your life. It's the most wonderful thing to do. This is the highest form of prayer. But we've all got to start someplace. So let's take every form of prayer as an opportunity to begin our journey to once the woodcutter's desires were fulfilled. Once the Brahman's desires were fulfilled, he inspired others and led a dedicated life. So he started off saying, hey, free me from the plight of this poverty. And then, as soon as he got free, he said, this is fun. I'm no longer poor. Whether I have or I don't have, I'm no longer poor. So therefore, he became even wealthier because he had no concept of poverty. The idea of poverty fled from him. Some of the wealthiest people that I met in my travels around the world had very little. In fact, very little. One day, I was taking a bath in a pond. Some Brahmins came up to me. When I got out of the pond, I wrapped myself in a gamcha and took off my wet langoti, washed it in the pond, and I was walking back to where I was staying so I could put my loincloth on the line to dry, and I only had a small towel around my waist. Some Brahmin youngsters came up to me and they said, give us something for our puja. So I handed them the wet loincloth. Well, I didn't have too much else that I could part with at the time. Some of the people that I met that were most wealthy had very, very, very little. So when he became wealthy spiritually, that was more than sufficient. The material followed as a consequence. It was just on course. When Srima and I came to the United States, we didn't have enough money to get out of the airport. We had only enough to make a phone call. And luckily, we found someone to answer a phone. And we didn't know about answering machines. So when we came to the United States and we began worshiping in a garage. And the garage grew into a warehouse. And the warehouse grew into an ashram. And the ashram grew into an estate. And we still just have the loincloth. That's ours. And the champus. So when you grow wealthy spiritually, the material will follow as a consequence. It just, it happens quite naturally. Are there other questions? Namaste, Ushama.
Swami said in one way that the Satya Narayana Puja is a specific puja, or does the story just refer to performing a puja in general?
It is a specific puja and a general puja both. And I'll tell you how it is a specific puja, because we are taking the vow in the puja to lead a life of truth. And it's a general puja because you can use any puja system or padhoti in order to perform the worship. We've given a small Vishnu puja at the beginning of this book, and the Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, followed by the Satya Narayana Vrat. You could use the cosmic puja padhoti. You could use an expanded version of Vishnu puja. You could use, there is a special puja for Satya Narayana himself, where you offer kumkum and sindur on a shaila. What do you call it? A salagram shaila. It's a salagram stone. And you can put, also many people offer kumkum on a Sri Chakra yantra. And there are many ways in which you can make the puja. We didn't put too much emphasis on the puja padhoti as we did on the Vrat Katha, on the story of the vow. Because in our perception, if we make the vow to speak and act in truth, this is a vow that carries through our lives, through our every action. Then the system of worship is somewhat secondary to the vow that we make. That's the real puja for us. So it's both a specific puja and a general puja. And it can be defined by the pujari in any way they want to. I know many pujaris who make 108 koilash stapans. They put 108 coconuts on top of 108 pots, and they worship all 108 coconuts. There are many, many systems for performing the worship, but the key ingredient is to speak and act in truth after you've done it. Are there other questions, please?
From Georgia, Debbie and her granddaughter, 8-year-old Angel.
Hi, Angel. Hi, Debbie.
They want to know, can this puja be done without homa?
Absolutely. It can be done without homa. You can just read the story. You can even do it in English. Just read it. Debbie, do you mind if I call you Davy? Because you're a goddess to me. And so, Davy, you can worship this puja without fire. You can worship this puja with just love. You can read it just in English. You can read it both in Sanskrit and English. You can do a Vishnu puja and a Krishna puja and a Satya Narayana puja, and you can do the whole cosmic puja. You can make it as simple as you choose or as sophisticated as you choose. That part is up to you, according to your time, place, and circumstances. We, in the Devi Mandir, have the vow to worship for 3 years with consistent worship at the fire. So for us, everything takes place at the fire. If it is a difficulty in your circumstance to worship with fire, then please don't refrain from worshiping because you can't have a fire. There is no excuse not to worship. Just worship in your own way.
And that this puja is a bit scary because it says that once one starts this puja, then you have to keep it up or else dire consequences. Why is very clear in a puja, Swamiji?
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I didn't see where it says you have to keep it up. It says you want to keep it up because as you sow, so shall you reap. And you want to perform the puja at least in life, if not in the temple. If you renew your vow every opportunity, then it gives you strength and fortitude with which to remember that every time I am faced with a temptation to distort the truth a little bit for my own selfish gain, I could say the mantra, Sri Satya Narayana Vrat Katha, and remember that that's not going to get me what I want. The ends will not justify the means. I must use the proper means, and I will get the proper ends. I know that. And if I cultivate the habit of catching myself every time that Mahishasura raises his head and says, you can bend the truth a little bit. No one will know. Then I can just say, Sri Satya Narayana Vrat Katha, and be freed from that temptation. That's empowering. That makes me a sadhu. That empowers me to be efficient. And that's my goal. That's our goal. And that's the objective of this puja. So it doesn't say you have to keep it up or you'll have dire consequences. It says if you say you'll do it and you don't do it, you're not doing the puja. And then you're going to get the fruit of what you sowed.
It talks in the next stories about people who never kept their word and are punished as a result. So, under being punished,
So what? So she is being punished?
No, she says that the reason why she asked this question is in the next few stories, there are people who never kept their word and they are punished. That's why she has this idea of dire consequences.
It is true. When we don't live up to our ideal of perfection, we are punished. Irrevocably. It is impossible that we will escape punishment when we knowingly don't do what we said we'll do. Even not that very concept of giving a promise and not living up to it, not abiding by the terms of our agreement. That is a punishment to us because we always have this anxiety. What's going to happen when I'm found out? What's going to happen when they call me on it? So there's the punishment immediately. If not, as in the next few stories, people didn't do what they said they would do, and they were actually punished physically, but we'll get there in our next session. But it didn't say that if you don't do the puja regularly once you start it, you're in trouble. It says if you don't do this puja, if you don't live this way of life, you're accepting mediocrity as a standard. Your values are inappropriate. It says it. These are appropriate values right here, Nanda. They say, if you live in truth and speak in truth and act in truth, then you will be free from conflict. And you may do without, but you will be free from conflict. And they are setting a very high standard of Dharma for us. How to be free from conflict and live in the ideal. And it says once you give up that ideal and go back and accept mediocrity as a way of life, you'll always be in conflict. You'll always be in anxiety and in dismay, overwhelmed by the circumstances of life. So I think there's a difference between saying that you must continue to perform this, or that you want to, because you see what kind of life evolves from it.
And Krishna is asking, Swamiji, I'm not clear about the idea of truth as a vow. Sometimes can we not be ignorant of truth without intention? Can we please elaborate? Truth is constant, but our understanding changes of relative truth.
Yes, Ushama, it is true. So let's start with the intention. Let's start with what we can control. What is our motivation? Are we motivated by selfish gain and we're knowingly distorting the facts in order to achieve our selfish goal? Or are we motivated by universal goodness and trying to spread the best we possibly can and be truthful? Let's start with the things that we can control, with what we can understand. I understand there are many shades of gray. So now let's begin with those things that are clearly definable as black or white. Both. First, you chant the text, and in the text it says, I promise, I Nandama of San Jose, promise that right now, Adya Jambu Dvipe, America Deshe, California Padeshe, right here, right now, I am promising. Not only am I going to chant the text, but I'm going to speak the truth, and I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, to the extent of my capacity. And I pray that God forgives me the rest. So both are included in the Sankalpa. One is the recitation of the text, which says, I promise to do this. And then the second is doing it. The completion, the fulfillment of the objective.
This sadhana is still with truth. What steps can we take? Seems like, is it just a sadhana of silence? Because if I speak,
God knows what's going to come out of my mouth. No, it is not just a sadhana of silence. We can start with the vow of worship and say, I promise God that I'm going to read this text. And I'm not going to allow my attention to be deflected from my sadhana until the sadhana is not complete. That means when I sit for puja in the morning, I don't keep getting up like I'm on a spring and, oh, I'm going to go get that. And then I'm going to go get that. And there's a knock on the door. Oh, I wonder who that is. Oh, well, and it also means when I'm doing my puja and I'm reciting my pot, and I'm doing the homa or whatever else other spiritual exercises that are included in my sadhana, I'm not going to be rehearsing the list of my things to do for the day. Or thinking about all the uncompleted items on my list from yesterday. It also means I'm not going to go off into reverie and to be daydreaming about all the things I'm going to do tomorrow. It means, hey God, this is your time. I promise to spend it with you. So I'm praying to you to give me the strength and the capacity and the focus and the attentiveness so that I can fulfill my vow and be with you. Because that's my intention. Great place to start. Now, let's carry that bhav into our workplace and organize our workplace like a puja. And make a clear definition of the tasks that I'm going to perform today. And as sadhus, as efficient beings, we'll segregate and organize those tasks so that we can just check them off the list. And as we get through our list, we find that we have free time, free mind to spend with Satya Narayana Vrat Ki Jai. Absolutely. It is so much more inspiring. Look at that old Brahmin in Kashi. Oh, he went into he was so excited that he couldn't sleep at night. He did the puja with such love and humility and devotion that God was pleased with him and he became an inspiration to others. Now look at the people who failed to perform the vow and didn't do what they said they would do. And they got caught in conflict, and one guy went to jail, one guy lost all his money, one guy, the lady lost her husband, and everybody had a calamity occur until they decided that, hey, maybe I should make worship as a way of life. Not just as a bribe that I'm going to give to God in the bad times, but as a way of life that I do all the time. And then my worship becomes my wealth. And what I want to do is worship. So now I have no more poverty. How can I have poverty when worship is my wealth? All I got to do is sit down and worship. And even if you can't make the porridge, even if you can't eat the sweet, you make it with what you have, you make do. And make the worship with devotion.
Edward from Seattle within Swami has just validated my concern as to spiritual wealth and trusting more and more in regard to my financial issues. Is it my fear, karma, that creates the cause of doubt based on this conflict?
Well, fear and your conditioning. Edward, from your youth, everyone has said to you, be a somebody, be important, achieve status in the eyes of your fellow men. Then you will be recognized as someone who has accomplished or attained a goal worthy in the eyes of society. And now suddenly you're coming into contact with these old sadhus who live on a mountaintop and say, hey, who cares about status in the eyes of society? I want to be wealthy in the eyes of God. And that's a whole different criteria. So a part of it is your fear born of your conditioning. And part of it is the conditioning itself that says, these are what society's values should be my own. You got educated to become a somebody. You got educated to become wealthy, to get a job. It was actually vocational training, it wasn't education. And they gave you vocational training so that you could earn income. And you need the income so you could buy all the things so that society will think that you're important. And now suddenly you have a new association with a satsang, a community of truth, who says, hey, you're not important because of your things, Edward. We love you for who you are. And if you love God and you love His creation, then you can work with us, you can be with us, we can share together, and we'll have a beautiful life, whether you have lots of things of the world or not. That's our criteria. So that's where the conflict of values comes. Don't worry, be happy.
Question from Nanda, why the importance of the prasad and its consumption?
Nanda, the prasad is the offering of the sincerity of our hearts. It's a token of our esteem for God. It's a demonstration of the sincerity and the intensity of the sincerity. And by partaking of the prasad, we're consecrating that offering and sealing the deal. Hey, God, I gave it to you, and I'm accepting whatever you give to me. If that's our agreement. I'm giving to you my best, and I'll accept from you whatever you wish to give to me. There's a verse in the Kilak Stav in the Chandi part. It says, Dadati pratigrinati nanati prasidati itahang rupena kilena mahadevena kilitam. It says, as we give, in that way we will receive, and in this way she is pleased, and by no other means is she pleased. That is, you get what you give. As you sow, so shall you reap. And there's a tradition for that puja, Nandama, that some sadhus, this one included, try to give everything in the puja. The worship is performed completely naked. And everything. I was in Rishikesh when I performed this puja, at an ashram there on the bank of Ganga. And I took everything I had, all my money, my passport, my everything I could think of, all my clothing, every article of any attachment, and I put it on the altar. And I was sitting there doing the puja. And I recited the mantras for every offering, and I gave all of these things, and somehow I felt uncomfortable. There's something wrong here. And this puja went on for a long time. It was maybe 5 or 6 hours that I was doing this puja, and I couldn't get comfortable. And after a few hours, I stood up, and I don't know how. I had I have one room with a Havan Kund in the center and my altar in the front, and then 2 walls were full of books, floor to the ceiling. I was a bookworm in my previous life. And behind me were a few utensils and a stove for cooking. And then I had my bed, it was a mat on the floor in the corner. And I stood up from the puja and I went back. Suddenly my attention was called to a book. And it was an old diary that I used to walk around. You know, in India, everybody gives you a diary. That was the token of esteem. You know, everybody's supposed to keep notes of what they have. And that came from Gandhi, I think. He said, always keep a diary and make sure you write down everything that happens in your life. So there was an old diary, and I had lots of diaries, and I had filled them up with mantras and stories and songs and all kinds of things that I had collected all around my travels. And I don't know why. I can't even tell you today why, but I put one diary off of one of the shelves, and it opened up. And there was a 5 rupee note inside. So I put the 5 rupees on the altar and finished the puja with ease. So now here we are giving the most that we can possibly give, completing and receiving whatever she wants to give us back. That's the prasad. Everything we got is the prasad. And that's what it means to consume the prasad. I am receiving her offering to me. This is the part of creation that she has given to me. She said, you've given me everything? Okay, well, I'm going to give you this part back. Or I'm going to give you more back. Or I'm not giving you anything back. You're done. You don't get any prasad. You're done. And that too is a privilege. To serve God in the way that she wants us to serve. So that's why we take the prasad, and it's so important to consume the prasad. Om Sang Saraswati Namaha. Namaste.